will say, if you didn't get a program for the 4 months of our program series, they're available right here. They're also available on our website. But we're going to be doing 4 months of exploration on the idea of exile and people's stories about exile. The real reason I applied for this grant is because they paid for me to go up to Massachusetts and see the Yiddish Book Center. I was fascinated. I went in winter, and it's a beautiful building. I don't know if you remember the story, but back in 2004, Adam Levsky wrote a book, I'm blanking on the name of it, Our Hidden History. He started as like a student, I think a grad student, wanting to collect books in Yiddish. And this led to him collecting millions of books from around the country, because there are Jewish people in every country. There are Yiddish speakers in every country practically, and he felt 20 years ago that someone needed to have a hold on some of the books that were like disappearing. And so he had just this, when he was writing letters by hand, typing them up on a typewriter, mailing them out to any and all temples, you name it. He would just blanket anybody that might have a collection of Yiddish books. So they got shipped, and they're still being shipped to him at the Yiddish Book Center, which he established out on the campus at Amherst College, which is where he had gone as an undergraduate. What it has become is a repository of all this knowledge that was kind of locked in because it was written in Yiddish, and there were fewer and fewer speakers and readers. So these books, they started to translate them, and as a part of that, and getting the translated works out, they've done these programs with public libraries. Who better to explore books in public libraries? So each year they kind of change the theme up, and they say, we want you to work through these translated works and possibly add programs. 68 libraries around the country got this grant, and we're one. We're the only one in Alabama. There's one in Georgia, the Atlanta library that got us grant. And then a lot in the north, of course, northeast. So I'm really fortunate, and it has developed into something that I never thought the scope of. I have learned so much, and I have gotten so many partnerships with different organizations. And I will say, if you want to see more about the Yiddish Book Center, they have a really great tour of the facility on YouTube. Come on in. Yes, please. But anyway, Aaron Lancy, forgive me, started it 43 years ago when he started collecting the books. And he has millions. And you go to the Yiddish Book Center, and they've set up like a real theater, and they have things about Yiddish theater and Yiddish music, and there's sheet music you can see, and books and novels and everything, educational materials, children's things in Yiddish. It's so beautiful. Anyway, I brought this to you because I wanted to explore the idea of exile. There are all types of exile, and I wanted to bring to you the beautiful synchronicity of how this happened. I was reaching out to different organizations, including the Civil Rights Institute, and the director got back with me and said, well, did you know Little Amal's coming to Birmingham? During this time, you're doing these programs. If you haven't heard about Little Amal, she is a 12-foot tall articulated puppet. She has been around the world. She's been to 18 countries. She arrived in New York City yesterday through the airport, and I have a reel of her arriving at the airport in the United States. And she will be touring different cities in the United States. She is the representation of a 10-year-old Syrian refugee looking for a home, looking for her mother. And she's a perfect example of why we're doing this. She will be in Birmingham on October 11th and 12th. Now, we are going to be a part of that. I've got it listed here. You can look up down below. You can look up walkwiththemall.org and see where she's going in the United States. But I wanted to use this example to ask you a few questions for audience participation. The word exile has many meanings, and there's also a lot of synonyms. Can you give me any good word that to you also means exile? Exodus. I'm going to give you refugee. Any others? We've got displaced. Very good. How about immigrant? The word immigrant, or immigrant with an E. As adults, we know that words matter. When you use different words, they can have negative or positive connotations. What about castaway? Or asylum seeker? That could be one. A lot of these have very legal, litigious meaning. Orphan. The word slave is also brought up. Homeless, yes, very much so. It could be expat, somebody goes to another country for a good job, they're not all negative. Expat, or a stateless person, alien. I could go on and on. And it's just a way to put your mind in a frame of reference that is more expansive than you're used to. There's so many reasons people are exiled or go into exile. One of the most prevalent right now is climate change. We've got war, gun gangs and violence. Could be that. It could be medical reasons. It could be poverty. It could be trafficking, trying to avoid trafficking of some sort. There's also a lot of people who have had to flee their country because of sexual identity or gender identity problems, religious persecution. You have to expand your mind when you're thinking of something that is so global. Little Amal, like I said, will be a part of our integration with this story of exile. And that day, she'll be downtown near the Civil Rights Institute. That evening, we're going to be doing a play here in the theater called The Empathy Project with Ed and Ladino. I hope that you'll be able to come. It's free, and it's going to be in the theater. I said that. But keep in mind while you listen to people's stories or you read these books that these are situations that, of course, I think most of us find ourselves in, first world problems. We have first world problems, and these are sometimes far and above what we deal with here. The books that we will be exploring, the first is by Yenta Mosh, and it's a short story collection. She wrote it, she was sent to gulags in the during the Second World War with her parents. She was sent to the gulags in Siberia, and she spent hard labor there as a young girl and kind of grew up and was displaced for quite a while and landed in Israel. And she still felt like an outcast because Israel was newly formed, and she knew Yiddish and Polish, but she didn't know Hebrew, which had been established as the country's language. So even in this place called home, she didn't speak the language, so she had to learn. Her stories are about that, about being an outsider in different situations. The second book we'll be reading is in the books, In the Land of the Postscript. And it's by Chava Rosenbard, probably pronounced that, Chava Rosenbard. She was a novelist, and this is a collection of her short stories. And what she did was write about those after World War II, where they went everywhere, whether it be United States, Canada. She resided in Canada, so a lot of them were set there. But the stories are about being an outcast in different places. The third book we'll be discussing is the Gladstein Chronicles. Jacob Gladstein was a poet, and he came to the United States way before World War II, but his family was in Lublin, Poland. And his parents let him know in 1932 that he needed to come back and say goodbye to his mother. So this is a man who'd been in New York in the early 20s, kind of the literary hotspot of the world, and the Yiddish hotspot of the world. And he kind of separated himself from his Jewish identity. He took a slow boat to Europe and rode a train across to Poland to say goodbye to his mother. As he's doing this is 1932, he was seeing things that were stunning, of course. He was seeing what was happening to the Jewish people. He was seeing, all the ghettos that were forming, everything. And so his book, he ended up coming back to America and writing these books about, hey guys, this is happening, this is real. The book was published in Yiddish in 1940, and it was very much current times. So it's very interesting to see his perspective. And he does kind of have a poetic way about him. The last month that we're going to be doing is December, and we'll be reading The African Town it's a young adult book by Irene Latham, who lives in Oneonta. She's really, really great children's and YA book publisher and writer. And Charles Waters, who is an actor who lives in Atlanta, and they're so great together. They write this wonderful story. If you're keeping up with the news at all, it has to do with the survivors who came over on the Clotilde, their exile from Africa. And they were the last slave ship to enter the United States. They lived and thrived in Africa Town down in near Mobile. And this is their take on those people's voices. It's very readable. And what they do is they write it in verse. So every chapter is a different voice. Could be a person on the ship, a woman on the ship, a baby. The ship itself has a voice. The captain of the Clotilde, and all of it. It's very, very intimate story and fascinating. I have the books in the back that you're welcome to check out upstairs. Grab the book, go upstairs. And the dates for the discussions are all in our flyer program. These books are also the Yiddish books, the Yiddish translation books are on Hoopla, which is a free app. and you can download them and read them as ebooks. And the last book, African Town, is on Libby as an ebook or an audio book. I listened to it. It was great. They change up the narrators, really great. So anyway, tonight, I want you to understand a little bit where this started from. The Yiddish Book Center, the idea of Aaron Lansky to bring together the works of these people who were writing in Yiddish. And I welcome Rabbi Josef Friedman of Chabad of Alabama, and to come up and talk to us a little bit about the Yiddish language and its endurance. And you can probably tell us a lot more. So please.
I was going to ask if there are any Jewish people here. So at least some of you will get my jokes. Not a complete loss. Thank you. It's good to be here. To tell the story of an older woman back in, the 60s, the 70s. In other words, the survivor generation. A platform at Grand Central Station in New York, and she's running around, and everybody she sees, she says, "Entschuldigt ihr Yiddish?" And of course, what? "Entschuldigt ihr Yiddish?" Every person she goes to doesn't know what she's saying. Finally, turns to one gentleman and says, "Entschuldigt ihr Yiddish?" And he says, "Ja, Mama, lech Yiddish." She says, "Oh, thank you, God. But easy." Already Yiddish was going by the wayside. That was a sort of accidental loss of Yiddish. They tell another joke of a doctor, either an immigrant himself or a child of immigrants, graduates as a doctor in New York, in Brooklyn, of course gets a job in a hospital where all the patients are Jewish and they're speaking Yiddish, and he is, of course, the Yiddish speaker, so he has to go in to talk to every patient. Finally, he goes to the director of the hospital. He says, "I'm done. I'm moving to Oklahoma. I'm getting a job in a hospital. I'm done with Yiddish." And he moves. There he goes. Anyway, a year later or so, they call him and say, "Doc, we need you back. We need you back. You're a good doctor." He said, "No, I told you I'm done with Yiddish." He said, "No worries. We'll hire an interpreter. You don't have to say a word of Yiddish. We can hire an interpreter to go with you, and that's it." Anyway, they lure him back. And sure enough, the interpreter goes with him into every room, and only the interpreter speaks Yiddish. The doctor speaks not a word of Yiddish on principle. But one day they walk into one room, and the doctor sees an older gentleman on the bed, and he says to the interpreter, "Go ask him what his name is." So the interpreter says, "The doctor will listen, wie is hasty." The guy says, "Yankel Goldstein." He says his name is Yankel Goldstein. The doctor says, "Yeah, I heard." Ask him how old he is. Then the doctor will listen wie alt ihr seid. And the patient says, "You shall tell the good doctor that I am 76 years old." The interpreter turns around and says, "And sagt is this, 76 Jahre alt." The interpreter's got to do his job. So Yiddish was fading fairly quickly with the Holocaust, right? I mean, the Holocaust killed 6 million Yiddish speakers. That was a big deal. But I'm probably the worst speaker you could have chosen for this particular subject. I come by Yiddish in this, I guess, honestly, it was my first language in a distant country called St. Paul, Minnesota. And my mother remembers the cleaning lady, who was not Jewish, running around, and I was 1.5, 2 years old, and I was helping her, but I didn't speak a word of English. And she, of course, didn't speak a word of Yiddish. But somehow we were best friends and managed. And then, of course, you leave the house, you go to school, you make friends, and then, English, you speak English. Every once in a while, we get some interesting visitors to the Jewish community here in Birmingham. And a year or so ago, a group of students from Queens College in New York came down to Alabama, and they were doing the civil rights tour or whatever, but they also had some Jewish participants, and they also wanted to have a Jewish experience. So they came to our synagogue. They came to the Chabad Center, and I got to speak to them. Talk about being Jewish in the South. Shalom, y'all. That's it. Now I'm done. Now you heard the whole speech. What else is there to say about being Jewish in the South? So that's that. Anyway, so during the question and answer time, one of the professors raised her hand, and she tells me in front of everybody, she says that she is from India, and she's from a certain culture or tribe that is persecuted in India, and she managed to escape with her family and came to America, where obviously she got a good education, and today she's a professor. But she says to me, she's trying to educate her children about her culture, about her heritage, about their heritage. And she says to them, I'm trying to tell them about the suffering that we went through and the persecution that we experienced, and they don't want to hear it. Rabbi, how do you tell your children about the persecution and the suffering of the Jewish people? I said, why would I want to tell my children about the persecution and the suffering of the Jewish people? They'll learn about that in history class. I tell them about the beauty and the holiness and the togetherness and just everything that is wonderful about being Jewish. Why would I focus on exile? So it's interesting that there is technically we've been in exile for 2,000 years. By exile, I mean from the land of Israel. My Polish grandfather was a young man of 14 when the war broke out. He and his family, they lived in eastern Poland, so they were able to flee across the border into Russia ahead of the Nazis. And they were promptly arrested by the Russians because they were illegal aliens and sent off to Siberia, where they spent a year and a half or so until suddenly Russia found itself at war with Germany. And so now, if you hated the Germans, you were friends with Russia, and so they let everybody in all these illegal aliens that had fled from the Nazis, they let them go. My grandfather, with his father, moved down to southern Russia, Kazakhstan, and then Uzbekistan, that area. They finally settled in Tashkent, where he met a young woman who was born in Ukraine. And they had also fled ahead of the Nazis and had fled eastward into the depths of Russia, and now had wound up in Tashkent. And so my Polish grandfather and my Russian grandmother met in Tashkent. Their oldest daughter, my aunt, was born the day the war ended. And the nurses wanted to name her Victoria. My grandmother said, no, I'm going to give her a Jewish name if you don't mind. But now that the war was over, nobody wanted to be in communist Russia. That was just a haven from the Nazis. Now everybody's trying to get out. Well, at one point, the Soviets allowed anybody with a Polish passport to leave. Well, my grandfather had one of those, so the whole family managed to get out. They managed to get to Czechoslovakia, where he was arrested by the Soviet government of Czechoslovakia, and eventually, thank God, was released. And by then, my father had already been born in Prague, and they made it to America in 1950. Why do I tell you all that? I don't consider myself a Polish exile, or a Russian exile, or a Czech exile. I was born in America. My father was born in Prague, but I don't think he remembers that. He was 3 when he came to America. My mother was born in a foreign country called Harlem, in New York City. So, actually, my grandmother was born in Harlem. My mother was born in Springfield, Massachusetts. So, I'm not an exile of any of these places, even though I just told you the whole story of how I got here. So how long does exile last?
They call you later. I'm in the class.
How long can you be considered a refugee, an immigrant, an asylum seeker, all of these things? And yet I just told you that I've been in exile for 2,000 years. So it's a very different take on what Jewish exile means. Of course, there's a spiritual component, but 2,000 years ago, your average Jew on the streets of Jerusalem, when he bumped into a friend, was not speaking Hebrew. Most of the people back then were speaking Aramaic. And Hebrew was the language of holiness. You prayed in Hebrew, you read the Torah in Hebrew, you studied Torah in Hebrew. The scholars wrote in Hebrew, but the spoken language was Aramaic. Then the Romans scattered the Jews to the four corners of the world, and for the most part, the heartbeat of the Jewish world was in Babylonia, today Iraq, parts of Iran, where of course they kept speaking Aramaic. Jews in Europe didn't really happen for another 1,000 years. I mean, there were communities that popped up, things happened slowly. History happened slowly. But really, the Jewish communities of Europe started around the year 1000. And right about that time, we've seen evidence maybe 100 years earlier, right about that time, there began to be evidence of something called, well, we call it Yiddish. They didn't call it that. It was German, written in Hebrew letters, with a lot of Hebrew thrown in. Hebrew? Yes. But also the language we were all speaking, which was Aramaic. So there's a lot of Aramaic. Actually, I was surprised at how much Aramaic. I watched Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish. And I was surprised by how much Aramaic there is. I thought Aramaic was just the language of the Talmud, the scholars. But no, a lot of the Yiddish. In Yiddish, Fiddler on the Roof is called Tevye the Milchiker. And Tevye, of course, is the main character. He has a daughter named, they call her Chava. Not Chava. But anyway, so it's German. Yiddish is German, ironically, right? Here we are, half a century after the Holocaust, and we're keeping Yiddish alive. But of course, it's German from 1,000 years ago, what scholars would call High German. And again, written in alphabet letters, in the Hebrew alphabet, and has a lot of Hebrew words mixed in. So it's German structure with Hebrew words or Aramaic words. And then over the course of time, a lot of Russian slipped in, a lot of Ukrainian slipped in. I spent the summer of 1991 in Ukraine, which was at that time, when I got there, it was still the Soviet Union. And I kept asking the Russian, I directed a summer camp, I kept asking the kids how to say certain words in Russian. And so somebody help me out. How do you say a plate in Russian? Not a good example. How do you say, because that's how you say it in Yiddish too. Tell me. How do you say, how do you say a duck in Russian? Utka. I said, utka. Oh no, I thought it was kachka. And they said, don't cry. Right? So there's a lot of, my Yiddish gave me a couple of Ukrainian words. Who knew? So over time, Polish words, in fact, my Russian grandmother, when she would go on vacation, she would take a chemedan. My Polish grandfather was married to her, would take a valise. They went on the same vacation with different luggage. So the Yiddish is flavored by where you live. My American-born grandmother, who insisted on speaking to me in Yiddish, only in Yiddish, her whole life, she would say, "Bitte effen de Winde," like Bubby. Winde? Winde is not how you say window in Yiddish, unless you live in America. Effen de Winde. Get an elevator, strip the button, gave the fit, right? Every other word is English, and they're calling this Yiddish. So obviously, the language is flavored by the local language. So Yiddish is the language of exile, which is why when the state of Israel was founded, the pioneers, the settlers, whatever you want to call them, decided that we are no longer exile Jews. We are now this new thing called Israeli Jews, and therefore we no longer speak the language of exile, and they modernized Hebrew. I can read Hebrew fluently from a prayer book. I can read the entire Torah in Hebrew. I can't communicate with an Israeli. I imagine that a modern German would have the same problem with my 1,000-year-old German. right? Languages change over that time. But I'm just reading a very interesting book called, I think it's called The Prime Ministers. Yehuda Avner, who was advisor to 4 or 5 different prime ministers. And he says that Hebrew was the official language of the country. But all of these people grew up speaking Yiddish, so they ran the government in Yiddish. Public speeches were in Hebrew. But when they were yelling at each other, or, dealing with some crisis, it was all in Yiddish. I got to Israel a few years ago and was stumbling over my Hebrew, and somebody said, avus vusin. Gesundheit. What was that? You're avus vusin. Like, I don't even know what that is. I said, what don't you understand? Vus, I come from Russia, so vos, but vus is the way Polish Jews say what? Vus is what? So apparently, as the state of Israel was founded, and a lot of immigrants came from Eastern Europe, and they got off the boat, somebody put a gun in their hands and said, go to the front, and they said, vus, vus. And so the frustrated Israelis began to call them vus vusim. Like, all you get out of that is a vus, vus. Not so welcome. Took a while for Hebrew to become the language in Israel. And today, purists are complaining about how much English they're using in Hebrew. So we'll see. Anyway, back to Yiddish. So it wasn't originally called Yiddish. I don't know what they called it originally, but it had different names. And by what they called it, I think you can get a sense of what people thought of this language. So for example, in a lot of literature, people would write something in Hebrew and then in parentheses write in jargon, and then write it in Yiddish. Jargon. What does that sound like? Jargon, right? Like in other words, the low-life language, the street language, that's jargon. This is how you say it in English. So for a long time, it was considered to be the uneducated people spoke Yiddish. I don't know. I mean, the Yiddish Book Center and actually the Yiddish theater of 100 years ago or whatever, they tried to make rules for this language, but it really didn't have any rules. You just spoke your German and you mixed it with Hebrew and you had fun. My father-in-law, of blessed memory, did not speak a word of Yiddish because his family didn't come from Eastern Europe. His family was from the exiles, talk about exiles, from the exiles from Spain in 1492. And so, although his family has been in Salonika, which is today Greece, Turkey, whatever, they've been there for 500 years, they still spoke a fluent Spanish. And a Jewish language called Ladino. Well, we call it Ladino. They called it Judeo-Español, which is exactly the same thing. It's Old Spanish, written in Hebrew letters, with a lot of Hebrew mixed in. So every Shabbos, when you would prepare the food on Friday so that you can eat it on Shabbos, he insisted that his Ashkenazic wife, poor thing, she made all the traditional Ashkenazic European dishes, he wouldn't touch them. He wanted his Greek, Sephardic food. He wanted huevos jaminados. Anybody speak Spanish? Huevos are jaminados. That's not Spanish, right? Ham? So it's a Hebrew word conjugated into Spanish. Jamin means heated or hot. Jaminados becomes heated. Cooked eggs, in other words. Could have just said so. So again, you have a Jewish community that takes the local language, writes it in the alphabet that they're familiar with, and then throws in a lot of Hebrew. I guess about 500 years ago, give or take, prayer books started appearing. Well, actually, that would have to be after the invention of the printing press, so give it a while after that. So 400 years ago, prayer books started appearing in Yiddish, specifically called women's prayer books, because the men could pray in Hebrew. But for those who can't read Hebrew, which is ironic because it's the same alphabet, but nevertheless. And so Yiddish began to be more acceptable as a Jewish, of course, it was only Jews who ever spoke it, but it now was becoming a Jewish thing, not just a convenient thing. And then maybe 300 years ago, people began to do some serious study, Torah study, in-depth, scholarly Torah study in Yiddish. Not so much writing in Yiddish, they were still writing in Hebrew and Aramaic, but the conversations were happening in Yiddish. And then came the 1700s and the Enlightenment, especially in Germany, France, and many Jews abandoned Jewish tradition in favor of the modern world. But there was still this love affair with Yiddish. And so into the 1800s, on all the way to World War II, you have a distinct Yiddish culture. And they call themselves Yiddishist. Are you Jewish? Not important. I'm a Yiddishist. And for here, I told you I'm the worst possible candidate to speak about this. I'll tell you, my grandfather, who was born in Russia, he was born in a town called Dokshitz. Actually, he says he was born in Dokshitz in Russia, and his younger brother was born in the same house, in the same bed, in Dokshitz in Poland. Borders keep changing, keep moving. But anyway, so he came to America as a young man. Very proud of the following story. He came in 1920. Must have come in 1940. No, they came before the war, so somewhere in the middle 1930s. And he turned 18. He was drafted. But he was a yeshiva student. He looked like this, you know, the traditional beard and the yarmulke. So he walks into the recruiting office, or whatever and they send him first to a psychologist, psychiatrist. And this guy takes one look at him and says, "Oh, what are you?" So they just have two questions for you. You go to the movies. God forbid, I would never be caught dead in a movie theater. No, don't go to the movies. Do you go dancing with girls? You mean girls I don't know? No. Stamp, 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 stamp. And he writes something and he hands it to him and he says, "Go." My grandfather looks at it. Yes, he had written, "Insane, but not dangerous." So here I am. I'm very proud to be insane, but not dangerous. But anyway, so he grew up a rabbi in Newark and then later in other parts of New Jersey, and a very thick Brooklyn accent. If he was sick, he had to talk to the noise. He went to Foist Avenue and Toit Street, where at Hoyts, that's why he's going to the noise. And of course, he spoke Yiddish. So in 1947, he becomes a rabbi in Newark. And he is invited by the director of the local Yiddishist club to come join them. "Rabbi Gordon, you speak Yiddish?" "Yeah." "Come join our club." So Zayda, what does Zayda mean? Grandpa, that's what I called him. Zayda said to this man, "Tell me about this club. Do you meet on Jewish holidays? Do you serve kosher food?" He said, Rabbi, this is not religious. It's just Yiddish. We read Yiddish books, and we watch Yiddish plays, and we talk about it. And he said, "It's not Jewish. I'm not interested." Zayda was a chaplain in 2 hospitals in Newark for over 40 years. In Beth Israel Hospital, which makes sense, and St. Barnabas Hospital, which I'll leave you scratching your head on that one. And he would go visit the official chaplain. He visited any patient, but mostly the Jewish patients. And one day, he walks into a patient and he says, "Hello, I'm Rabbi Gordon. How are you?" And the guy says, "Rabbi Gordon, now you come see me? 30 years ago, I invited you to join our club and you didn't want to go. I don't want to talk to you." Okay. So he left, came back the next day. One guy was still there. "Mr. Whatever, how are you?" "Rabbi, I told you, I don't want to talk to you." Third day, same thing, but before Zayda left, he said, "Listen, I'll leave you alone. But I just want to ask you something. You have grandchildren?" So the man said, "Yeah, sure. Thank God." He said, so Zayda said, "Do your grandchildren speak Yiddish?" I said, "Rabbi, American born and bred. They don't speak Yiddish. It's a disappearing language." So Zayda said, "I have kinahara over 50 grandchildren. I'm one of them. And they all speak Yiddish. Yiddish On Yiddishkeit geht nicht. Yiddish, without Yiddishism, in other words, Judaism, has no anchor, has no foundation. If you want to preserve Yiddish, you got to preserve the reason why it's spoken. So the language is such a delicious language. It's so expressive. It's so beautiful. And it's so Jewish. And it describes, there's a very famous scholar who came to America and became one of the leading rabbinic scholars in New York over the last century. And his father was also known as a great scholar. And he said, my father taught me the ins and outs and the laws of the Jewish Sabbath. My mother taught me what it tastes like, and what it smells like, and what it feels like. My father did that in Hebrew. My mother did it in Yiddish. So Yiddish is a very comfortable, it's like a warm blanket on a cold day wrapped around you. And I'm sad to say that I have not been as successful at passing Yiddish down to my own children. I speak to them in Yiddish. But my wife's favorite story is driving carpool home from school every day. And my daughter at that time, she was a second grade or third grade, and every day, I don't know what it is, about 3:30, but every day in the car she had a meltdown. And she would cry and scream, and I'm driving, what am I supposed to do? So I would say very calmly, Chayam bekumen baldahe, which means we're going to be home soon. And she was screaming, Chayam bekumen baldahe, I don't even know what you're saying! Poor girl. I'm trying to teach her Yiddish, and it's just frustrating. But that's where it lives. And thank God when my children get older and go off to school, and that could be anywhere in the world, but Birmingham has a shortage of Jewish high schools and advanced Jewish studies. Wherever they go, they come back speaking Yiddish. Because a lot of their teachers teach in Yiddish. And of course, as I say, the flavor and the smell and the feel of everything Jewish happens in Yiddish. So will a place like the Yiddish Book Center, will that revive Yiddish? It'll be a wonderful run. But if we can infuse it with Jewish flavor, bring it back to what it was meant to be, and that is a language of Jews wherever we are, that has a homey, family feel. I mean, in what other language can you eat gefilte fish? What is gefilte fish? I know people have been fishing for years, never caught a gefilte fish. And Gatzimus, the Rosh Hashanah is coming out, and Gatzimus. What's Gatzimus? So there are words that are there that our grandparents remember. If they shared it with us, we may remember. But it's not meant to be nostalgic. And it's not meant to be a language to be jettisoned when we feel like we're no longer exiles. It's meant to be a home base. And sort of the what do you call it, how do you make cheese? It starts with a base called. Like wherever flour, what am I thinking of? Rennet, right? This is supposed to be the rennet that flours everything Jewish. And one last story. I saw a video, I was just trying to find it now while you were talking, I couldn't find it. I saw a video of an Asian, I think he was Japanese, and it'll make sense at the end of the story. A Japanese student who was traveling through Israel. And he's being interviewed on Israeli TV in Hebrew. And he's speaking a flawless Hebrew. And he's explaining to the interviewer that Hebrew is his 27th language. And he's here in Israel because he wants to experience it. Learn a language is one thing, but he wants to experience it. And he's paying his way because he is teaching Yiddish in a local university. So the Israeli interviewer, who speaks Hebrew, not Yiddish, says, "You speak Yiddish? In Hebrew, I'm not Yiddish." He says, "Yeah, tell us something in Yiddish." So he says, in a perfectly accented Yiddish, it was so amazing. He says, tell you a story. And he tells a story about this cafe that he found somewhere on the streets of Israel, and he went in where Mr. Cohen speaks Yiddish. So jedes Montag, every Monday, gehe ich dort nach rein und ich kaufe einen Kaffee und ich rede mit Mr. Cohen auf Yiddish. Every Monday I go and I speak to Mr. Cohen in Yiddish. Ich komme rein, come in on one Monday, and Mr. Cohen is laughing. Sag ich zu Mr. Cohen, was lacht ihr? Sagt mir, he says, last time you were here, after you left, my Arab employees approached me and said, in Hebrew obviously, Mr. Cohen, we didn't know you speak such a fluent Japanese. Thank you. Any questions?
The rabbi brings up this, and it reminds me, I can't remember when, but our movies are going to be themed with this, and one of the movies we're showing is Deli Man. It's a documentary about the loss of the Jewish delicatessens all over the nation, and a lot of it's feature a lot of really great comedians from New York, and you've got to see this in the theater. But if you'll notice on the schedule, we're doing movies and documentaries. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I do hope that Yiddish becomes, just stays the mishmash of wonderful languages that it has. And then to the stories of exile, I'd like to introduce you to Olena Vyshyvanyuk. No. Say it right now.
Vyshyvanyuk.
Yes. She is a new friend of mine, and she is at Inspiritus, which is located in Homewood in West Oxford area, where Hiccup is also located, Hispanic Interest Coalition. And I've asked her to come and share her story of exile from Ukraine, which is very relevant, very now, and I will let you, did that turn it on? It's on. Okay. So if you will, let us listen to Olena and learn a little bit about what's going on in our world.
Thank you to the previous speaker. It's a great speech. It's just difficult, to speak now, and my speech is not so tearful and laughing, but it's just situation. So my name is Olena. I'm a refugee. I'm from Ukraine, and this is my story. I have a great family, a husband. We have been together for more than 20 years. 3 kids, 6, 12, and 14 years old, all daughters. And we had really usual and cool life, we had our own business, wedding dresses, we created beautiful wedding dresses in Ukraine, and kids and dog, and home full of love and screaming, and children runs all the way. It was always great. And we had one usual morning, my kids still sleeping, were still sleeping, and my husband just walked early to make a coffee. So he shouted at one point that war had begun. I was thinking, just but him probably didn't wake up yet, and it was February 2020. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Explosions started very soon. Russian bomb at our airport, and sounds were so loud and terrible, and we still couldn't believe something happened, because you just can't believe it's going on. Like it can't be, it just can't be. Never. But our men, they started to prepare our shelter on the ground part in case, and we started to prepare our emergency backpacks. Have you ever imagined what you should put to your emergency backpack? It's like, of course, something you put. So you need food and drinks, at least for 3 days. In case, if you know, missile will hit your house and you will be burned in the shell. And some medicines, and clothes, and probably documents just to let people recognize who was there in case they will find you after some time. You don't need your money, they will never help you. So it was, we had our emergency backpack close to our legs. When we heard air alarm, we should run away. 10 minutes. It was 10 minutes for my CQB. 10 minutes from the air alarm signal to the time when you will have explosions. Estimate time. You should take your backpack, people you love, your pets, and run away. Run to escape, to save your life. So we usually had to sleep dressed all this time because all our windows should be open just to hear air alarms, otherwise you will never hear. And you never had enough time to dress it up. And it was cold, it was winter in Ukraine. In Ukraine we have, snow, frozen. I hate winters from that time. It just was too cold. Well, we had many attacks every day, and even more nights. We used to run every time because you just can't breathe. We couldn't sleep and we couldn't eat. It was really horrible situation. We even say that every day we have February 24, till now, till today, for 18 months, the same day. It's now end for us. In a few days, we decided to send our kids and parents away. Russian forces, they were too close to us. No one knew what it would be next. And I just couldn't risk my kids. We stayed, me and my husband. Why? Because we tried to help. We tried to do something, to make it happen, our victory. And we believed that war will be finished really soon because it was so unfair and so, wrong. We worked as volunteers. We used it to create stuff with volunteers. We used it to open our house, not only my family, all families around, because we had so many people who tried to escape from the, other territories which are closer to the war. We had new family every few days. New store, new parent, just to give them food, but few days to relax, and then to send them with evacuation buses away from this country and this war. I feel that sometimes that, all our world was full of pain, but we still tried to survive. That continued for months. One after another, after half a year, we decided that we need to do something with that. My kids were away for too long and they couldn't still there for all life. So we decided to leave Ukraine. It was probably the hardest decision in my life. And I have made a lot of decisions. Because, to choose, to help your country or to have your kids safe, to be with your parents or to have your kids safe, can you decide ever? It's almost impossible. I truly hope no one will have to do such a decision. I choose my kids. We gathered our things, one bag per person, 5 persons, 5 bags. But truly, what can you put there inside? What do you need? You need your kid's hand in your hand, that's all. And you can go. We left Ukraine. Now when I see my kids smiling, I am I'm sure it was the right decision, but somehow I feel guilty about this decision because we have so many kids still back in Ukraine, and they are still in shelters. They are still there. Nothing changed. So it will be with me all my life, probably. The first thing I noticed when we came from Ukraine, we stayed in Poland for 2 weeks, it was sky, white sky. No alarms, nothing happened, no missiles. It was like, outside Ukraine exists all war, without all the sounds, terrible sounds. But you can't believe it when you're inside there. You think like, oh, war is destroying. No, but no, not like that. We moved forward. How we get to the Birmingham, it was, after 8 months, we actually had no savings, nothing, because you just spent all you had. And we found out information about this program, Do For You, where you can just find sponsors, and if they are approved, you will get documents. So we found family here, just great people, family. They helped us a lot. They did crazy job. I never believed someone can do the same. We did the same in Ukraine, but just because, it was so terrible situations that you just could help all the time. So these people, they gathered people around, like friends and families, and they provided house, cars, schools. They helped a lot. We are friends now. We are family now because they just say, me, my kids, all of us. They not only provided us with home and all we need, they let us into their community. They met us with friends, with all people around, so we had all full community, and it was great. But anyway, it was difficult. Like, we came to New York, we know nothing. My kids, my smallest daughter, she knew even one word in English. So when she started school, she couldn't even ask to go to the restaurant. It was crazy. We solved the situation, but it was, something really difficult. But these people, they tried to help in all the questions, I noticed that when we have really hard times, we usually should meet someone really bright, some people really bright in our life to help us probably to pass the situation. So we found these people, our sponsors. And they had planned for us for each day, documents, schools, enrollment, step by step, just to not panic, to not think too much, and we moved. And life became better. My kids, they found a friend, they can speak now, even better than me. Sometimes it's just great. Our normal life began to return to us. My husband, he works as wedding dresses designer, and he dreams about his shop. Probably he will got one soon. And I got my job. I worked with refugees in Inspiritus, a settlement agency. So I'm working with Ukrainians now. I'm helping with benefits, documents, application. I'm advocating them in all, state organizations. I'm trying to help, and we can help. We can do a lot. It's great. The other thing we did Alabama United Heart for Ukraine. It's not a profit organization. We are trying to help Ukrainians here in Alabama and back there in Ukraine. We are helping in different programs with child, with rehabilitations, with a lot of stuff. It's just our way to help. And I understand when I'm helping, I am just alive. I feel more real person, more like person. It's probably when you are starting to do this job, you will never quit. It's my thing. So I'm working with refugees. So sometimes people asking like, are you okay to work with refugees because you can see so much pain and you probably will remember your pain. Yes, because I understand. I live it, so I can see it in your eyes. I can, and if I can help, that's all. I feel great. I'm done. And here we are, great country, great land, blessed. Like, it's very cozy and home. We have a lot of friends and work. We have all here. I'm here. You can see me always at schools, at work, speaking with people, laughing sometimes, My heart is not here. My heart stays there with my people. I feel like I'm still, running to the shelter. And I'm trying to escape. Every time when I see news, it's my usual, schedule to wake up, to drink coffee, to see news. My heart is broken. Together, all pieces put inside, going on. And then will be next day, I'll do the same, but I just can't stop. It's our life. I'm here. My heart is back there. So, this is my story. I just want to show you my Ukraine. My practically beautiful Ukraine. My country which I love. And where my heart is. It's Volodyanka, the city Russians occupied in the first days. They destroyed it all. Bucha. When our forces came inside, even soldiers cried about what they did. Chernihiv. European, the city was destroyed, all, like you can see, all houses, no military objects, just people. European. Here you can see people waiting for evacuation under the destroyed bridge. Just people with kids. Kharkiv, center of the city. Kharkiv again. It's our reality now of all Ukraine. That's what I'm trying to explain always. Ukraine has no safe places now. No. You can't say where the missiles will be next. Kiev, our capital, new houses, another situation. Kiev, Lviv, my city. 1 month ago, we had missile attack in the center of the city. It was Mariupol. This city was switched out of the land. It's not exist anymore. All big city. Mariupol again. Odessa. Odessa, our city was big humor and so nice architecture. We're just proud of the city. They have attacks every day now, just because it's a beautiful city and we love it. Vinnytsia, they had missile attack in the center of the city, right in the north. They have a lot of people there. This is how Ukraine was first day of the war. People tried to escape. For now, almost 6.5 million Ukrainians left their home. It's almost most of them are women with kids. And they are trying to find new home, at least have safe place somewhere. So why would I tell this to you? I don't want to make you feel sad actually. It's just because we can do difference. We can help each of us. And we should never allow this happen again. It just can't be in our world, And I really grateful to my sponsors, to my friends, to people who helping us so much. People, you are great. We really need your help, and we you do a great thing. Thank you.
So there are a lot of elements to the stories, a lot of different stories. And hopefully in the next 4 months, you can look at the schedule and find something that will interest you. We're going to try to live stream as many of these programs as we can so that you can possibly go back and see some of the things you missed. And I have books in the back that you are welcome to check out, and lots of food that I'm going to have to find a home for, so might as well eat some. And again, if you want to participate with Little Amal, that will be October 12th. There are activities on the web. It's kind of spearheaded by the Civil Rights Institute. There'll be activities for children, a parade. She will walk through the Civil Rights District. So it'll be very, very interesting event. And she won't come here, but we will have her here in spirit by doing our play here. Question? Yeah.
Yes, will all the events that are listed, they'll all be here?
All the programs are here. Mostly in this meeting room. We'll be using the theater. I think one time we're in another program room because this one's booked. Yeah, pretty much everything is here. And as I said, if you don't have access to a library card or something, get with me. I'll figure out how to get you a book. If you can't come to the discussions, read the books anyway, engage with us. And I sure do appreciate, share this information, share the information that you see in the program. We also have some Alabama United Arts for Ukraine information, if you want more information with that. And I thank you so much for coming and participating. And I hope this will be a very enlightening and fun 4 months. Thank you.
You already took yours. Oh, you took mine.